Hello, everyone. John Adkison here again, doing another interview regarding. Well, the interview is intended to be broken up and put into pieces for the circumcision, in quotes, circumcision harms documentary or docu-series. Started out being a documentary, but I don't know why it's going to fit into a documentary. It's going to be too huge. So I have Andre with me today. Andre, you're from Australia, right?
Yep, from
Yeah.
capital Australia.
Yeah. So if you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the movement for genital autonomy.
Yeah, so almost 50, and I can't remember how I got connected through some other group. But yeah, happy to share my story about adult circumcision. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you got preputially amputated as an adult, right?
Yeah, so I had a twisted testicle. I had to go to the emergency department, and as the doctors were checking me out there, they noticed that my foreskin was not retracting, and I was like, "Is that not normal?" No, it's not normal. And the twisted testicle issue went away, but they were like, actually, you've got hernias as well.
Oh.
So there's like, we need to operate there, and while we're operating on that, we can also circumcise you. So, and that happened.
Okay.
And they didn't give any option. Yeah, I didn't realize there was option. Yeah.
Yeah,
later.
You don't have to be preputially amputated to address phimosis, and what you're discussing is what they call it is phimosis, but I think there's like a couple actual forms of phimosis. There's as you know, here's my little tool to educate. As you know, when they're babies, when we're babies, the inner part of the prepuce, or the foreskin, as a lot of people think of it, is fused to the glands, and it takes varying amounts of time for that to break down and separate, and for things to pull down. So that's a separation. So maybe your inner mucosa was still adhered, but then there's also the form of phimosis where the dartos fascia is too tight. So it's too hard to for that dartos fascia to spread out and open up.
Yeah,
to
that was
allow
the issue that I had. Was that the opening at the top was only about a centimeter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit bigger than a centimeter across.
Yeah. So obviously your wool doesn't contract, but it was like there was a rubber band in there or something, and I just could not. My erect penis would not come through the opening that was there without pain.
So they didn't suggest things like creams or anything like that, and stretching exercises or anything like that. Just let's just cut it off.
Yeah.
Do you know if the people that recommended this to you, were they preputial amputees themselves?
No idea. Yeah, no idea.
Do you have any glans coverage left?
It does. Yeah. So my foreskin does probably naturally cover maybe half of the head of my penis.
Okay.
I can, obviously, I can pull it, the foreskin around the head of my penis, but it doesn't stay there.
Yeah. Well, even I can too, but it's like I have to, push my.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable because it's like you got the corpus cavernosum in there, right? And I think of it kind of like those balloons that you twist and make into animals, stuff like that. It's like you've got these two balloons inside of your penis, and when you push down, it's like you're making those balloons kind of like bend and twist and stuff like that, and that's just not comfortable.
Yeah.
So and that's my problem with trying to do restoration is if it's like restoration, it kind of involves putting something on the glands and then using that as a countermeasure to pull your foreskin up and then create a stretch there. Which I problem with that is, okay, well, are you really stretching it, or are you just pulling up your scrotum up onto your?
Yeah, right.
to me, it's like you have to do a dual tug
Yeah, right.
this way in order to get things stretchy. So, and I have a good bit of inner mucosa left, the part that would have been covering my glands, and I don't want to stretch that part. I only want to stretch out the shaft skin that I have remaining.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it'll be a matter of putting the tape in the right place and somehow pulling it like that.
Yeah.
So have you considered doing restoration at all yourself?
No, yeah, I guess the thought of the effort, yeah, versus the benefit, it's not dramatic. I did see, so over the 3 days after the operation, I did watch the skin on the head of my penis just change from this lovely sensitive pink to this dull grey, almost fingerprint hardness. And just watching that loss of sensitivity, realize, oh, I didn't realize that would happen. I don't, if I'd known that that was a consequence, I would have sought alternative methods, because that clearly doesn't look, I've clearly lost sensitivity.
Yeah, the sensitivity of the glands itself.
Yeah.
Right? And not just talk about the sensitivity of the loss of your prepuce. That's less. People say, well, it's less sensitive. It's like, okay, well, so the glands might be less sensitive, but you're missing erogenous tissue. So it's
right. Yeah.
So it's like saying, okay, well, I removed my finger, but my hand is still sensitive. You have to. It's kind of, I don't know how to word it better, but my pinned tweet is kind of aimed at Basio, who said something. Her study was okay. It's not as good as the Sorrells study, obviously, but the way she lays it out, I linked to Brian Arp's thing, but I say saying that removing the foreskin doesn't reduce penis sensitivity is a bit like saying that removing the pinky finger doesn't reduce hand sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, the rest of the penis is still sensitive. So yeah,
So I had not had vaginal intercourse before I was circumcised, so I can't compare the before and after, but I obviously can compare masturbation before and after.
Yeah. So you have less mobile shaft skin when during when you have an erection. But it's still mobile.
Yeah.
I have maybe about that much mobility.
Right.
Of course, it depends on how strong the erection is. But I mean, sometimes the erection gets so full that it's like things hurt elsewhere because I'm pulling on the skin so hard.
Yeah.
And of course, things have gotten better for me as I've gotten older. I'm 51 now, but when I was in my teens and 20s, it's like, of course I enjoyed masturbation. It's it's kind of built into the psyche and everything else that's left over. But after studying this, I've realized, well, I was actually dealing with pain at the same time that I shouldn't have had to deal with. So all right. So yeah, I've got a list of things I try to cover on this issue, and I'll go over them a little bit. It sounds like there's some words that you didn't follow along with, and just let you chime in if you've got anything else to say on it. So the first major section is about how things are physically different with the intact versus preputially amputated penis. And then the next section is about how it affects sexual relationships with partners. And it doesn't sound like you can really speak too much to that, but I put two and two together thinking about this, so I could talk a little bit about at least the way I imagine it being different. And then there's the psychological impacts of this, and then the how it affects relationships, outside of sex. And then I discussed a little bit about how this whole issue intersects with FGM and intersex normalization surgeries, and how this whole issue affects social productivity, and last but not least, I cover forced retraction. So the first thing about the physical part is acropostion, and John Geisinger from Doctors Opposing Circumcision, he talked about this you can find the video on my YouTube channel. He presented an image of a Greek, I think it was a Greek statue, and this man is intact, and you see a little bit of thing hanging off the end of his penis. Well, that's the part that they used to cut off, supposedly, just the acropostion, well, I would consider it the foreskin, because that's the skin that is before the rest of the penis. But I don't even like that, even if it wasn't that, even if it's like, you're also calling it just skin, and it's part of the penis, and it's not just a little flap of skin. It's it's a roll of skin that unrolls. So yeah, and then now they lay bare the glands, and so instead of just cutting out the part at the end, they make it look more like that. And it's sensitive skin, right? It was sensitive before they cut it off, right? I don't know why they had to do a Sorrells study or a Bosio study or whatever to prove that, yeah, it's sensitive. It's innervated.
Yeah. It changes when it's exposed.
Yeah, just talk to some intact men. They'll tell you it's sensitive. Yeah, such. It has those minor corpuscles and all that good stuff in it. And it's there to protect the glands. And you were just talking about how your glands changed after they removed part of your prepuce. The part that's exposed changed color. So when you look at your glands, because you've got some coverage, does your glands color change as you go down the glands? Like is it part pinkish and part darkish, or vice versa?
It's probably darkest. It's mostly the same color until it starts to curve around.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, even the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, their first policy was like, it's there to protect the glands. I don't know why they took that out of the feature lens, but I have this picture of me on the internet sticking my tongue out and holding a piece of paper about how it's like leaving your tongue stuck out all the time. After a while, your tongue dries up and it's not comfortable and all that, right? So. Yeah, I've even seen videos of guys who said, well, they basically do auto circumcision. They pull things down and expose their glands and try to go through the day where their glands exposed, and they're like, no. It's absolutely horrible. It doesn't feel good at all, right? And even other guys I've talked to that got cut as adults, they were like, it took them a couple weeks for things to desensitize to the point where they could handle it. Otherwise, you even watch these videos of kids, they're getting cut 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. They're walking around with, trying to not let anything touch that area, for a while, right? It's like, yeah, because it's, it's
painful.
Yeah, it's not just the cut that is not feeling good, right? I mean, if you get a skin cut anywhere else on your body, you probably try to keep from touching it, or you put a band-aid on it or whatever to put some antibiotics on it or something like that to protect it. But it's not just the cut, it's also your glands. It's meant to be internally, so it's on fire. And then again, it's a double folded tissue. As you can see, I'm rolling it up and down. I believe it or not, I used to think of it as it must just be a flap of skin, right? I
used to think it was a single layer of skin, but then realized no, it's a double layer.
Yeah, it unfolds as the penis becomes erect. People say turtleneck. It's like, that's actually very accurate. I mean, could you imagine cutting this, the skin off of the turtle's neck? It's poor turtle wouldn't be able to take its head out uh, to eat or whatever. I mean, it's horrible. So anyway, luckily we have some other skin down below that allows things to move, but and so that creates a rolling mechanism, and that adds to sexual activity like masturbation. Like you need it, so you don't have to rely totally on. Sex lube is a very popular thing in the United States.
Yes.
From what I understand, it's a much lower. You don't see it as common in stores in say like Germany or other places where men are primarily intact. But you go to the pharmaceutical store or whatever, CVS, Walgreens, or whatever. It's not too hard to find sex lube, KY Jelly or whatever. I recently took a picture of a bunch of lubes in a adult toy store recently. I've been thinking about what I could do with that, like create a meme out of that or something like that. But yeah, if you need a lot of sex lube, chances are you're missing out on that rolling mechanism.
Yeah, that's the case. So when I make love with my wife, it's like we have to use lube every time.
Really? Yeah. For me, the biggest thing is just starting off. I did this other video, and I'll go and share it now on my YouTube channel. People can find it, but it's not too complicated. Just try to stick your finger inside your fist. You don't have to hold your fist like really tight or anything. Just gently, and you can leave a little bit of a hole there, and just try to stick your finger in. It's not easy. It's like it drags. And yeah, a vagina has lubrication, but the lubrication is inside it. The labia, it kind of keeps things closed off, and you have to kind of like, hopefully that labia spreads out, and all that makes it easier to get started. But I put two and two together. It's like all my partners. It's like sometimes I grab that labia, and if I get too aggressive, I end up tearing them, and that's not good.
Yeah.
So the whole thing, I'll continue to tell my story. What I did was I took a little bit of double-sided tape, stuck it on the end of my finger, and took a piece of a finger off of a glove and stuck it on my finger, unrolled it down so the end of the thing would act like the glands because it's fixed. And then I took the glove and doubled it up over the tip of the penis, the finger, and then went like this. It's just like it went in so smooth and so easy. I was like, man.
Yeah.
I was like,
so I can totally imagine that vaginal sex would be easier, more pleasurable likely, and not have to stop, put the lube on, and then continue. So that is a frustration every single
time. So when they did yours, did they use a Bell method or did they freehand it?
I don't know, because I think I was out.
They put you on.
I think I had epidural for the hernia surgery at the same time. So
okay, do you have much inner mucosa left?
What's that one?
Okay, so the inner mucosa is the part that would be inside of here, that would be on top of your glands, and then you got the ridge band on the end, and then you got the outer layer, right? So then it all comes down, right, onto the shaft, and like for me, it's like about half when I've got an erection, about half of my penis is inner mucosa. You can tell there's like a line. You can see there's like two tones, and they've got your scar line.
The line. Right?
Yeah. So if the scar line is way up here, closer to your glands, chances are they use some sort of Bell method. So you end up having very little inner mucosa left. Right. But the other method or methods is they pull up. They pull up and they slice, or they pull up and use a Mogen clamp to try to cut off the blood flow and make it coagulate, and then they slice it, or the Jewish barzel, same sort of thing. It's not quite like the clamp; it's just a thing they slide over and then they slice. It doesn't clamp at all. People, you can look this up. It's not too hard to find. Barzel, BARZEL.
So the distance from the bottom of my glands to the line of where they've cut is about, or probably almost 2 centimeters.
Okay, so you got a fair bit of intermucosa
Yeah.
still left. So that means that your frenulum area is probably still, quite a bit there. Um, I've heard of cases where they've like freehanded right up underneath the glands and they cut out all the frenular area, and it's like, yeah, I mean, when you look at the Sorrells study, it's very obvious that the frenular area is the hot spot. And after I started thinking about this and learning about this and looked at the Sorrells study and starting putting two and two together and paying attention to that closely when I have sex, like, oh yeah, that is where things gonna get really heated up.
Yeah.
So yeah. So that kind of leads on to the next thing is the moisture lube. You say that you kind of need to use lubrication
Every time.
to get at least get things going. And females have various amounts of lubrication too, right? Some are some squirt and some have just a little bit. So yeah, it's good that the man has some to bring to the table if he's
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So I've covered the holding mechanism, the moisture lube, and then also even just touch a little bit about the frenulum. On my thing here, it has these little things right there. It's supposed to show the frenulum, but the whole really when you look at the frenulum, it's similar to like how your frenulum underneath your tongue works. It helps anchor things, so it gets a little tight and everything, and it spreads out and it pulls things back up when the erection goes away.
Right. Okay.
And then there's the ridge band, and
The ridge band is the cut.
well, the ridge band supposedly is the part at the end. So you've got the dartos fascia that squeezes things closed at the end, and the whole idea. I mean, particularly if you look at, and I'm not trying to be pedophilic here. This is looking at this from a clinical, medical perspective. You can tell, things are closed up down there at the end of the penis, and there's a little bit of hangover past the glands, and it acts like a sphincter, a one-way sphincter.
Yeah.
So it allows stuff out, but it doesn't allow anything back in. So when urinating, it spreads out a little bit and it goes back up. But what I've been told from intact men, particularly one in Australia, Michael Winnell, from Foreskin Revolution, is that when an erection starts occurring, that causes everything to pull down, and that spreads out. And there's these specialized nerves in there that like the being pulled apart, and that creates a sensation unto itself that feels really good. So that's what I guess is called the ridged band.
Yeah, I guess it's going from memory like it's 30 years ago. So I just, remember there was a loss of sensitivity, but not really being so aware of actually where was that located.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's definitely some loss of sensation, not just from the skin, but there was, I guess that's probably where it's come from. There's just some loss, some decrease of, pleasure.
yeah. Sorry, man. That really sucks. I really hope that medical professionals will continue to educate themselves more on this. It's really hard when you're dealing with medical professionals that are biased, really. That they're obviously cut themselves, and so they don't know what it feels like to have it. So they think of it as just extra proper skin. And hey, I used to be one of them. People say, well, I'm biased. It's like, well, wait a second. And talking about bias real quick, you're probably the least biased on this topic as anyone can be, because you've experienced both, except the sex part, but sexual intercourse. I consider myself kind of second down the line as far as being non-biased, because I'm cut, and I'm actually advocating for the other way around, and I have two intact consents.
Yeah, so I would totally, yeah, suggest it's not a helpful thing. It's detrimental to pleasure. It's not worth. Yeah, it's not worth being a standard practice. And yeah, I do understand the bias. It's like if that's just normal, then you kind of inflict that on others just because it's default.
Yeah.
And it's what everyone's done, so it's just routine. But yeah, I don't see there to be any need for that. And having seen the before and after, the loss of pleasure, the loss of sensation, it's like, why?
Yeah.
I don't recommend it.
Now in Australia, I understand the cut rate is pretty low, so you're not like surrounded with a bunch of guys that say horrible things.
Yeah, well, it's
about
curious when
penis.
I guess it was the late 70s. There did seem to be, I think, in my cohort of school friends. I wasn't going around taking full sample sizes, but I did recall that it seemed to be there were more cut boys than not, but there were definitely a number of uncut boys. And I guess it was the thing that I remember was it was the cool kids that happened to be circumcised, and so they were kind of I don't know. That was actually my wish. I as a boy I wished to be circumcised more, not because of what it actually was more that I was the same as the cool kids. And I had expressed that to my mother, and then when she found out that I needed to be, or apparently needed to be, circumcised as an adult, she was like, well, you got your wish. But by that stage it was like, actually I like being uncircumcised. And I actually don't wish this. So even when that it was apparently inevitable, operation was suggested, I was like, actually I'm quite happy the way I am, and I'm disappointed. And then after the operation, I was even more disappointed. So yeah, I'm not biased. I actually have, there's no reason why I would suggest this other than that I've just experienced both sides, and I don't recommend it.
Yeah. Well, I certainly appreciate you speaking out about it. As a father whose wife's OB offered zero information on the topic, and then living in a culture where most men my age and even younger in their 40s and probably even in their 30s, because in the 70s and 80s it was like a 90-some% cut rate in those times. So I think that some people coming here and there from other parts of the world is changing that a little bit, but still people don't talk about it much. So anyways, so that's all the physical things that are missing. So it leads to various things like a hairy shaft. Hairy shaft tip can be coming from a couple areas. You've got the hairy shaft from the scrotum. The scrotum is being drawn up onto the shaft, and that's called scrotal webbing. And the scrotum is hairy. Then you also have the hair from the pelvic floor, also being potentially getting dragged out, depending on how things are cut exactly and all that. But some men have hair from their pelvis being drawn out onto their penis when they have an erection.
Yeah, I've not detected anything like that. I've not felt any pulling during intercourse, so it doesn't seem to be an issue.
Yeah, it sounds like again you have some mobility, so your skin probably accommodates your erection a little better than others. And then for me, at least when I was younger, again things have stretched out. as far as I know, most guys, there's like boobs on women. Our testes, our balls are down to our knees when we, in older ages, right? So, but when I was younger, because it would draw up on my scrotum, my testes would get drawn up with that, and they would get squeezed, and sometimes they would get squeezed so much during a really powerful erection that one of them would pop inside my inguinal canal up into my body, and that was very uncomfortable.
Oh, wow.
So, and when you're sitting there trying to tug on things, and when you're tugging and you're pulling your scrotum up every time you tug, it's again, that's why you have to use lubrication. So, yeah. And then also for me, because things are really tight on the upper part, toward my pelvic floor, things get really tight. So when I get an erection, the more that my corpus cavernosum fills up and pushes out on my penis, it causes my penis to draw upward towards my stomach. And anyone that has a penis knows that when you have an erection, you don't go pinning your penis. It doesn't feel good, and it can cause damage. Things can break inside, and you have internal bleeding. Meatal stenosis or meatitis is another thing that occurs. That's just the closing of the meatus, where the urine comes out. It narrows. I think that I would imagine. Of course, I don't think anyone's ever done any study, but I imagine that pretty much every man that was cut, at least as a baby, has some level of meatal stenosis or meatitis. Because supposedly, I don't know where the draw line is between meatitis and meatal stenosis is, but I've heard of cases where things have completely closed up there on the circumcised or preputially amputated boy, and they have to cut things back open to let things flow.
No, I don't think there's an issue there.
Yeah. Okay. I have a vivid memory of when I was like 7 or 8 years old. I had to go in because I had like a skin bridge across there, and I was spraying everywhere when I urinate. My grandmother was like, "Not having this." Took me to the doctor, and the doctor just did a quick little snip. Didn't put me away asleep or anything. I don't think I, other than a little tug, I didn't feel anything because it's just scar tissue, so there's no sensitivity to it.
Mm.
And then you have skin bridges that happen because, again, when you're dealing with an infant, that inner mucosa is adhered to the glands, and when they cut that off at a young age, I always laugh at people that say, "Well, it's better to get it done when you're a baby." It's like, well, actually, there's a problem with doing it when they're a baby. You have to make sure to lubricate this with Vaseline or some sort of cream to keep the inner mucosa from readhering to the glands, because this is what leads to skin bridging. And I've known men that talk about how they got to stick a Q-tip in between the skin bridge because it would jump from the inner mucosa up to the glands here, and then there would be like this gap underneath, right below the coronal ridge. So
yeah, I don't have any of that.
Yeah, I do not call that more hygienic. Yeah, I wouldn't think that would have happened to you because it sounds like you were already separated. It was just tight skin. Then you have erectile dysfunction. There's been studies saying that you're more likely to have ED. Supposedly the statistics are that Viagra sells a lot more in the U.S. and Israel than it does elsewhere in the world. Wonder why. And then you have connections to premature ejaculation. And I one day when I was thinking about this, and I think I was actually doing an interview, and it's like it just kind of came to me. It's like, well, premature ejaculation. Well, if this is the hot spot, the frenulum, and it's exposed on the guy that's cut, right? So that touches the vagina right away. But if you have a little bit of coverage or a little bit of mobility, then it doesn't get exposed until it's inside. So yeah, I could see how that might have an effect on premature ejaculation, but that's just my theory. Nothing proven or nothing. But
the flip side would be that it's less sensitive skin, so it actually leads to the opposite. So
yeah, it could be argued both ways. Yeah,
yeah,
it could be for sure. So yeah, I don't think I've seen any studies that nail it down solidly one way or the other. So, but yeah, people think that, okay, well, if it's going to be more sensitive, then I'm going to have PE. Not necessarily. Right. And then you have general botches that occur. And anyone that wants to, you go out to circumcisionharm.org and you can find several pictures of several botches. And there's also a doctor in Egypt that wrote a book. His last name is Fahmy, Fahmy. He put together a book, and you can look through there and see all sorts of ugly pictures.
yeah,
But yeah, the engineer type person in me thinks, well, you know, 90 degrees, right? You need to do 90-degree cuts to make things straight and everything like that. How the heck do you do that when you're dealing with a tiny little penis that's, flexible and all that? It's not like, it's not like you're dealing with steel or wood or anything like that. Just try to make so you put that clamp on, the wrong angle or whatever, then you end up having, too little skin on one side, too little skin on the other side. So when you have an erection, you end up, having a curved erection. So.
Yeah. So yeah, no botches. Mine. There's just a bit of scar tissue. I can see where the two sections of skin are joined. You can see some lines of scar tissue.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems.
Did they use stitches on you?
There were stitches, yeah. So I remember during when I post-op, I was 3 days in hospital. I had a number of erections, and of course, the first one was extremely painful. Rereading sections of the Bible where they circumcised the Philistines or something like that, and they were in pain for 3 days later. I was like, yes, I know that pain. Like, you don't want to walk anywhere, and you definitely don't want to go into battle.
Yeah.
And so having an erection with stitches and freshly cut skin that's healing, and the erection is basically stretching that. Yeah, just incredible pain, and just it all switched off. It was like, oh my gosh, there's pain, shut down.
So your erection shut down?
Erection shut down.
Okay. Because from my understanding, you can't always control that erection. It's like you just have to wait for it to wait it out.
Yeah.
Or stick ice down there.
I think the first time it happened, I don't know if it was day 1 or day 2, but it was like, wow, that is a lot of pain, and that just overrode all the whatever endorphins or something that were pumping through. So that shut down, and then I think the next day it was painful again, but less painful. Obviously, the skin is healing and joining, and I can't remember if the erection shut down on that day, but it got to the point where that's painful, and then it was less painful, and then less painful, and
did they have you on any heavy painkillers?
I don't recall. I suspect so. There was other scar tissue with the hernia stuff, so there would have been. There were three sites of scalpel. 3 sets of stitches. So yeah, there would have been.
Man.
And I had, actually I recall I had hallucinations. So I was definitely on something.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's another thing. It's like people say, well, it's much worse to get done as an adult. I don't agree.
So I can imagine it'd be better to have it done as an adult, because one, my penis was fully grown. So in terms of the foreskin having to, I imagine as a child, the penis grows, and the skin, the foreskin has to grow to accommodate the penis, and so it's effectively dragging I don't quite know how foreskin grows, but I can imagine that the penis gets bigger and has to enlarge the skin, and so you're kind of dragging this skin up, whereas my skin was already full size, and so they were just cutting it off, and so I didn't have the growth to kind of contend with.
I read somewhere that we actually get erections. It's kind of in the design that we get regular erections in order to keep things stretched out.
I can imagine.
Otherwise it would shrink, and we don't want that, right? So we had to keep our skin stretched out. So even if we're not having sex on a regular basis, our bodies create erections in order to keep things stretched out. So that's all the physical aspects and the physical harms to ourselves. And then there's the sexual relationships, and we've kind of already discussed this. So you need lube a lot, or you need to do things in a very gentle, careful way. You can't just jump right into it. Even when you're dealing with heterosexual, where lots of foreplay is a good idea. Sexologists, I hear say this regularly. It's like, men, you gotta give your woman more foreplay time because they need more time to work up to things. Whereas guys, we're ready to go almost right away. So it's good, not just for the woman, but also for getting that lubrication there and opening things up and all that.
Yeah, so I think I'm probably a guy who likes more foreplay, but it doesn't ever seem to be enough. So I either don't produce enough pre-cum to provide lube, or my wife doesn't produce enough lube. So it's never enough. We always have to use lube.
Yeah, gotta work those Skene's glands, as I understand it. So, and then there's the anal sex, and with anal sex, there's definitely no lubrication involved, but there's gay men out there that's they're happy to have their foreskin. In fact, those who understand, actually seek out men that are intact, because things are more natural there, and
pain.
Less pain. You have that rolling mechanism to allow for insertion, and you also have the lubrication. That's as things have come down there, you not only have lubrication on the glands, but you also have lubrication along all the inner mucosa. So that much, I often do this as an imagery, and this doesn't have a whole lot of foreskin, but it's you go this far inside, without any friction. That didn't slide on my finger at all. That's quite a bit. You'll go further after you've already added lubrication inside, and you're able to go even further now. But that's a long way without any kind of friction at all.
So no, I don't have any experience with anal sex or homosexual docking.
All right. So homosexual I like to pick on Jim Jeffries because he did this on stage, kind of mocking and laughing at. I'd say it was kind of homophobic, basically, is what I'd say about what he was doing. And I went and protested in front of a couple of his venues ever since he did this. But homosexual docking is not possible without the foreskin being intact. Okay, then there's the psychological impacts from this. There's the trauma from the cut itself. Now, you were an adult, you knew what was going on, and you were put under and all that. So you're probably not dealing with any of the things that Ronald Goldman discusses in his book, where he talks about it being done to infants.
Yeah, I don't have a feeling there's any trauma from the cut. The psychological trauma from the cut. I think it was just disappointment, like 10, 20 years later to realize, oh, there was an alternative. I just didn't kind of ask the doctors, is there an alternative? And they didn't present an alternative. So I think it was just disappointment.
Yeah, so there's definitely, this is my next thing, is the trauma from the discoveries of the loss, the harm, and in your case, the discoveries that there were other alternative ways to deal with. And trauma, grief goes along with grief, and there's I've seen two things. There's like 5 stages of grief, or there's 7 stages of grief. But anyways, you go through those rounds of grief as you get to accepting that you've lost something, right?
Yeah, I definitely feel I've lost. I've lost something, and almost even regret not having had or attempted vaginal intercourse before to actually really compare. But I just know that I'm missing out. My lovemaking is like I'm 95% certain it's less sensitive, less enjoyable because I've been circumcised. The issue of having to put lube on every time. So, having the foreplay happening and then to kind of stop that. No, we've got to put lube on now, and now we can resume. That's not pleasant. Pleasant's not the word, but it's an interruption. And probably maybe 3 times we've stopped and done that, and I've not been able to regain an erection after that. And so it's like, well, if I had not been circumcised, then possibly would have been able to continue with the lovemaking at that point, would not have had to stop for lubrication. So those kind of things I definitely feel disappointed, missing out, frustrated, and definitely frustrated that the doctors did not provide an option. Did not consider that. So I feel that was maybe a duty of care that they neglected to give.
Yeah. Do you think that the medical field in Australia has improved upon this arena at all?
Yeah, I really don't know. I suspect so, but I don't know. I don't have boys myself. I've only got girls, so
yeah. I've even opened up like urology textbooks and like took screenshots of parts of the urology textbooks and emailed. I've created like this huge document on one urology textbook and emailed. There were 8 editors of this one urology textbook, and I managed to find 7 other emails, and I emailed all of them this paper that I wrote up on feedback about their book. It's like, you guys are very, these guys are a little bit biased, and this is a 2020 edited book, so it's not like it's old, outdated or anything like that. So of course I also call some hospitals and all that and say, hey, I'm not happy not happy as both a parent as well as a victim. So. Okay, and then there's, for some, the psychological effect leads to suicide. We know of some men that have
no issue there.
Died by suicide over this. Jonathan Conte is probably the most well-known one, along with Alex Hardy, and I'm going blank on the other guy's name. He was made into a girl, and he's got a twin. I'm going blank on the name right now. Anyways, so there are cases, and I know some men that are have been very traumatized as they've learned about what they've lost, me included. And then there's a psychological impact to children, and I'm not talking about children that have been put through the practice themselves, but even children that just know about this going on in our world, and there's over 1 billion of us that are victims in this world from these, I call them rituals, really. genital cutting rituals that are performed in children. I've seen videos of young children out protesting this along with their parents, and on one side, it's like I really feel bad that those children have to know that this is going on in our world, and at the same time, I can't overprotect them. I often think of that girl that my mind is sludge today, who ended up at the UN protesting the change in the climate and all that. So yeah, but and her dad shared a story about how she went when it was after she first started learning about this, that she went into a state of depression for a while, and then when she went out and held a sign, she came alive again. So she discovered her power, and definitely had a lot of power. She ended up at the UN. So
yeah, wow.
And spoke like a champ. So yeah. Then we have medical professionals who have realized that this is harmful, and having to live with this in their hospitals they work in or whatever, and knowing that this is going on. Some are involved in our movement, have talked about this. Some have lost their jobs over this topic, unfortunately. So yeah, the US is a tough place when it comes to this topic. And then there's the psychological impacts to the parents. Now, I'm not a regret parent myself. Both my sons are intact. However, I was ready to let my first son get cut, and I'm very embarrassed and ashamed by that. So I can't easily shame other parents for letting it happen to their parent, their children, because hey, I was going to do it myself. But yeah, I can only imagine how distraught I would be right now if I knew what I know now and my first son got cut. So even worse if both of them got cut. And thank you to all the regret parents out there that speak up. I am thankful for Intactivists. If it wasn't for Intactivists, I don't think my wife would have gotten the information in time. Luckily, she changed from an OB to a midwife, and that's where she got some information. That led me down this crazy and wild rabbit hole. And then we have intact individuals who I did a video of one. I drive Uber, and I had this couple in my car. They have 3 girls. Cute. These 2 are cute couple. She was having a birthday, and I took them to where they were going to celebrate the birthday, and I ended up being lucky enough to pick them back up, to take them back home too. So it was a little ways away. But on the way there, we got talking about this, and he's intact, and he actually talked with his wife there about how in high school he would have lied about being not circumcised because of the social pressure and all that. So I kind of feel bad for the type guys that feel like they need to. Right? Doesn't sound like he had too much trouble with that in Australia.
No.
Yeah, he's Hispanic, and it's not super common with Hispanics, particularly since a lot of Hispanics are Catholic, and Catholics are technically against the practice. But they were like, yeah, I definitely supporting your movement and everything, and they were like, yeah, we'll do a video or whatever. And it's like, cool, let's do a video right now. So I turned my camera and did like a short little 1-minute TikTok video, and he's like, I'm intact and I'm happy, and I sent it over to her, and it's like, and I'm really happy to intact. Like, awesome. Like that, that just shoots down the whole idea that women prefer circumcised men. It's like, No, just women in the U.S. that are culturally conditioned. So, and then the last but not least is the advocates for genital autonomy, or the intactivists. You can use either one, I guess, but I like advocates for genital autonomy because some people think of activists as bad for whatever reason. They're blocking the freeway or whatever, holding up the science. But I prefer to consider myself an advocate. I'm advocating for our children to stay intact and keep their whole bodies, right? But yeah, it's I see a lot of psychological challenges for those of us that are out there advocating, because we're constantly facing with these people that will try to gaslight us or whatever for advocating, and they'll give us all the bad excuses for we're doing it. I almost have an automatic response anymore to people that are like that. It's like, why the heck are you defending a genital cutting ritual that is performed on children? You think we're the pedos? It's just plain disgusting that you're defending a genital cutting ritual. That's all that it really is. It's a ritual. You look at the history, it's a ritual. It's not medical. It's not medical. Just because it's done in a hospital by a medical professional doesn't make it any less of a ritual. So
I wonder if the United States is, I don't quite understand the thing with the United States and Israel, but there obviously seems to be some kind of tight thing there, and wonder whether the circumcision of the Israelites has somehow infected that through religious.
I'm quite.
So I don't quite understand that, not being someone from the US, but it seems to be a connection.
Yeah. Well, clearly in Israel, is a huge percentage of Jewish people there.
Oh, totally, understandably.
So that whereas Jewish people in the U.S. are a minority. However, there's a lot of walking on eggshells when it comes to the idea of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
Right. So to bring this up, a lot of people just automatically jump to calling you an anti-Semite. It's like, so I'm trying to protect a child that is born to Semites or Jewish parents from genital mutilation. Does that really make me an anti-Semite? I mean, I'm not calling for them to be gassed or executed or anything like that. And just, and that's a really, really tough thing, because it is really a very core part, I guess, of their religion.
Yeah. But even as as Christians, if there's a Christian person, then they're acceptable regardless of the mutilation of their penis. They are acceptable as God's people, as a Gentile that don't need to be circumcised.
Yeah.
And there's even Bible passages that are quite clear on that. You don't need to be. So it's like, I can understand for the Jewish population, but I don't understand for like a Christian population.
Yeah, and there's a couple websites that address that, littleimages.org and Catholics Against Circumcision .org. They both address it, and it's been made pretty clear even by popes and what do you call it in Catholicism? Is it priests in Catholicism? So there's a ton of material out there that makes it pretty clear when it comes to Catholicism. But it sounds like when you look at the history of it all, it's like they're as it is, we already know that Christianity went off into several factions like Lutheranism and all that stuff. But it's like there were two parts that originally started separating out as far as whether circumcision was still needed or not after Jesus. So but when it comes down to religion, there's one thing to me that trumps it all, and that's religious freedom. And I think that my religious freedom was stomped on when I was an
Totally.
infant. So
Totally.
Give your child that religious freedom. If you like religious freedom, give it to your son. give it.
Yes.
Give it to
Don't
your
make
girl.
that choice before they're. Yeah.
So that's I think all the psychological stuff. Unless you got any other psychological thoughts on it. All right, and then there's relationships. This doesn't apply to you. The child-parent trust thing.
That's right. Yeah.
You were trusting the doctors. Then there's co-parenting. I've known cases where people have gotten divorced or very close to getting divorced, and a major fighting topic, right?
Yeah,
so before you get married, hey, talk about this topic, people. Yeah. Whether to leave your child intact or not, definitely talk about this topic.
Well, yeah, my wife and I had talked about that. If we had boys, that they wouldn't have been circumcised. That was clear, and that was her position anyway. But it was also my informed position of seeing what had happened to my penis.
For
like,
sure.
no, I don't want anyone to go through that.
Yeah, especially your own child. Then there's the mother-child bond effect that's affected here. Even Ron Goldman in that book talks about the mother-child bond, but the idea is, especially around natural childbirth these days, that some people are very anti-hospital, because I don't know if they still do this in hospitals, but like they used to like take the babies directly away right away from mom and put it into a plastic box and go stick it in a nursery and all that. It's like, why do they do that? I don't quite understand that. I think that maybe somehow their medical interventions are better for the baby or whatever, but the idea nowadays is like skin to skin contact and keep the baby with you right away,
Totally.
and all that, and keep it with you for quite a while. And that continues to build the mother-child bond, not just from within utero, but out of utero. And this is even true for a lot of the wildlife, a lot of mammals and stuff. So my wife is a little jealous of me because I got to hold our oldest for quite a while after he was born. She thinks that he bonded more to me because of it. So and there are studies that show that that breastfeeding has been interrupted by this practice, particularly if the baby is taken away right away and gets snip.
Yeah, not my issue there.
Yeah, no, that's by AD in this case. Then there's the whole idea of pedophilia, and I add this one to my list since I started doing the interviews. But this is my theory, right? So if you're missing or you're missing the most erogenous section, again, depending on how you're cut, the Sorrells study shows that this area up here is more erogenous than this down here, and if you're cut with the Bell method, then more of this is missing. So you end up having very little sensitivity, the friction or whatever. And you've lost sensitivity here, and you're missing all that sensitivity here. Some men complain saying they can't get to ejaculation at all, et cetera, et cetera. But there's also squeezing, right? So that's a sensation too, right? If things are tight. And this is something I hear. I like things when they're tight, too. But what I hear is that younger women or girls, especially ones that haven't gone through birth yet, are tighter than others. And even in like one movie I came across, these women were doing their Kegels for this guy, make sex more pleasurable for him. Like, well, that's so they can do more pressure.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't that be another factor in leading men into being pedophiles if they're going to be attracted to younger women because they have tighter vaginas? And even in the United States, is a growing trend, from what I understand, women getting reconstructive surgery down there to make things more tight. Okay, guys, maybe we should stop cutting penises so men have all their sensations and they plus need for this stuff.
Right.
And maybe they won't complain about, or women won't, think that it's all them when the man doesn't
Yes.
finish.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the relationship between the doctor and the patient. I imagine that this has definitely affected your relationship with your doctor. I don't know if you see the same doctor anymore or not.
Well, yeah, I had no idea who this doctor was. It was just the random doctor
Okay.
in the emergency department, and and there were definitely a number of doctors. They were looking at my hernia as well, because I had 2 inguinal hernia lumps
Mhm.
that were not painful, and so they were like, they'd hold pressure on the hernia lump, ask me to cough, and like, is that painful? And I'd be like, no. And do it over and over and over again, and I've got to get another doctor to come look at this, and it's like, I'm closed here, and you're asking me to cough, and is this some using ritual or something? It was a bit traumatic.
So it sounds like the hernias weren't even a reason to cut.
Sorry, say again.
It sounds like the hernias weren't even a good reason for them to perform surgery if you weren't feeling well.
I think it,
Andre, I'm lost.
but it could be like the hernias were done. Just so I can actually lift stuff and it not,
okay.
Have your intestines spill into your scrotum.
I see.
But yeah, it was a bit, they were like, oh, have a look at his foreskin as well. And they were, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So yeah, I felt like I was a bit of an exhibit for a while. So there were a number of doctors there, but they were all unknown doctors to me. I didn't know them personally, and never, didn't take note of who they were, and never seen them again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, for me, I have less trust of doctors because of this whole issue. Particularly that's continuing. I probably would have more trust of them if there was more honesty about the issue amongst the doctors, in particular here in the U.S. There's one doctor that I, in fact, here it is right here. I wrote the medical board of California over this. There's a doctor that put a video on TikTok saying, he was basically saying that there's no effect on sexuality when you circumcise your child. And I'm like, no, that's a bunch of bull. That it's very clear that it does. And I mean, even the Basio study doesn't rule out the effect. So the fact that to me that's misinformation being put out to the public by a urologist here in LA, close to me. So I tried all sorts of things to try to reach out to him and say, hey, take this down. And he didn't respond. I even called his office and all that, and he didn't take it down. So I wrote the medical board, and their attitude was like, oh, it's not a big enough deal for us to do anything about. Like, what? You're allowing someone to lead people into harmful surgeries. So yeah. So hey, people watching, write to the medical board of California and tell them, hey, do something about this. Listen up. I know that there was a protest that was held outside the medical board of California so many decades ago with Marilyn Milos and James Owen and some others, to try to get them to change their stance on the topic and all. But yeah, it's like, are they really surprised that people don't trust them when something like this is going on? That's very obviously wrong. So you want us to trust you when it comes to vaccines, and and when you suggest procedures being done, all that. Well, build our trust. And then there's the relationships between friends and family. We've lost some friends and family members as far as relationship wise, where we've advocated for their child to stay intact and all, and they just shut us out. after we try to share information. So I really just don't get that. I don't understand, when someone tries to share information with you, you don't necessarily have to accept the information, but I would still, I'm appreciative of information, even if I don't agree with it. I still appreciate people giving me information. I don't cut them out just because they've shared information with me that I don't necessarily agree with. I don't know why people get so defensive about it, but I guess this is one of those taboo subjects for whatever reason. So we even lost one cousin that used to actually be with an intact guy, and she was pretty insistent on cutting her son because the new guy that she was with, she was having a child with, was cut, and he was kind of insistent on it. She wouldn't fight at all. She was totally on his side. So I don't really get that one, but yeah. So have you run into any kind of that?
No, I haven't.
It's not very common in Australia. So
Yeah, but it's definitely worth. I've got some friends who are pregnant at the moment, and it's probably worth a discussion. I have to work out how to.
As low as the rates are in Australia, and I try to understand in like New Zealand, it's like not even 5%. It's like really low. I mean, it's like really like down on there from what I've come across in New Zealand. But there's two groups on Australia. One is Foreskin Revolution, Michael Winnell, and he has some others that work with him. And there's they're now called the Darbon Institute, which stands for the person that founded the organization, Darby. But both these organizations advocate for genital autonomy. I mean, the Foreskin Revolution kind of focuses on foreskin being good and all that, but and I wore the Intaction shirt today. I got a Foreskin Revolution shirt too. All right, so that's all the relationship stuff, unless you have anything else to add to it. And then this interrelates to female circumcision. That is the word that they use in places that they do female genital cutting. They also use, I actually wrote up the little list here, katan, katna, sunat. These other terms that they use for female genital cutting. And everywhere that they do female genital cutting or female genital mutilation, they also do male circumcision. And that's one of the reasons why these two are tied, because where people are trying to get rid of female genital cutting, it's in the culture where male genital cutting is going on too. So if you don't attack them both together, chances are they're both going to continue. So because
I haven't had any interaction with that at all.
Yeah. One of my tweets was, and I said, fight me on this, but in order to end FGM, what we're going to do is we're going to have to educate men on how they're harmed by MGM, because men supposedly are the powerful ones, right? Particularly in these areas that they do female genital cutting, as much as the females also advocate for female genital cutting. If the men are the ones that are in power, the men are the ones that decide, oh, this isn't a good thing, then FGM will go along with it. It's kind of like a downhill thing. So, and then you have the intersex normalization surgeries, and when you look at all of it, all three together, they have the same sort of roots. Like people in the U.S. will say, "Oh, I want my son to get a blowjob." So you're basically saying that if he's intact, he's less likely to get a sexual partner. That's the same sort of thing they use for female genital cutting in those cultures. They say, well, I won't be able to get it in my husband, and we have to be able to sell our daughter. So we get our goat and cow and whatever else and trade, same stuff. Same reasons. And same thing with intersex is, parents are worried that their intersex child will grow up and not be able to, find a partner because of their, weird genitalia or whatever. That's not necessarily the case. There's tons of videos out there now. Within the past 4 or 5 years, tons of videos have shown up on YouTube. Some of them are TEDx talks. that where these intersex people talk about the topic. And there's also a this person here, Hida Valoria, wrote this book, also in LA, and Hida is an intact intersex person. So,
Right.
The problem, the reason why I bring these three together as one issue, genital autonomy, is they have the same roots. So if we attack the control, attack the financial side of it, attack the whole idea that it's going to affect them having partnerships later on, then it all just end together. You get me okay?
Yep.
Oh yeah. I'm getting internet connectivity issues here and there. Then there's a social productivity side of this. And I see a lot of advocates, of course, including myself. I'm sitting here doing this, out working, making income for my family. And I feel bad about that, but I feel like this is my duty. I've learned something that very, very few people have learned. And I've learned it as a cut man. And I've learned it as a cut man with 2 intact teen sons. So now I've got a group of like 160 other men that are cut dads of intact sons. But I seem to be the one that knows how to talk about it really well. And if I was in the shoes of other, future parents out there, I would want me to be talking about this and spreading the information.
Yeah, that's great.
So, just doesn't pay the bills though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it would be really nice if this whole and all this general cutting stuff wasn't going on, and I could maybe be working on solving cancer or something like that.
Yeah.
Or worldwide hunger. I'd go for that. And then there's, last but not least, again, forced retraction. Again, so as we've addressed this multiple times, the glands and the inner mucosa are adhered during early childhood. So some people have gotten the idea. I don't know where this came from or why intact men haven't. I put a stop to this, but you're not supposed to pull it down to clean that in there. Just like you don't go inside and break the hymen of a girl to clean the inside of her vagina. You leave it there and you clean like a finger, right? If there's still a little bit of something there on the end, put them in the bath and let them soak for a little while, and it'll clean up. It'll resolve itself. So people will sometimes call it the whole UTI reduction thing. This first of all, the study is questionable, because I don't think they covered all the variables when they tested UTIs for intact versus not intact. But the difference of UTIs for intact versus not is so tiny. It's not worth cutting that off for that. And boys can get antibiotics just like girls, and girls get 9 times more UTIs than boys. So UTIs is not an acceptable excuse. So that's my soapbox for the for the day.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I encourage you to keep going. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm definitely happy to provide that unbiased position, be able to see the before and after as an adult, and go, no, don't recommend circumcision or modification of genitalia for, particularly if there's options. And I had a medical reason, and was disappointed that they didn't provide an option, and I'm disappointed with the result. And the downsides of interrupted intercourse for lubrication because of not having a foreskin,
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that,
and
that was
losses-
one thing I forgot to cover is the way I understand it. And I think this is true. Is the ridge here draws out the lubrication. If you know, if you're not doing these short movements inside, if you're dragging it out like this every time, you're drying out with air, obviously, and you're also pulling the lubrication out of the vagina. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. We often have to re-lube.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it's
So,
frustrating, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and regrettable. So yeah, I encourage people not to be circumcised.
Yeah. So
So thank
I
you.
really appreciate it, Andre. You're actually I think you're the first person I've interviewed that got cut as an adult. I've been after Nikos Koustouras. But hey, anyone can. Yeah. In fact, if I reached out to Brendan Marotta, the guy that put together the American Circumcision documentary, he'd probably let me snip out parts of that documentary where Nikos speaks up. Nikos doesn't go into much detail like you and I just did on the documentary, but you know he got cut at like age 18 and hated it, and he went through restoration. Yeah. So, but anyways, definitely good to have another voice from another man that went through it as an adult.
Yeah, cool. Pleasure. Happy to help.
All right, Andre, thanks again. Have a
Cool.
great day or night or whatever there in Australia.
Saturday.
All right.
Already Saturday here.
All
Thanks,
right.
Dave.
Yeah,
See you,
okay.
John. Bye.